Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Jordan, also known as J Monster, and welcome back to another battle replay. It's gonna be, you'll have to excuse me for the sound quality. My headset's broken, so you will probably be getting a lot of background noise and things like that. I'm gonna have a bunch of games coming up in the near future here for you. Content is probably gonna continue to be sporadic for the foreseeable future, just because I am so busy with my real life. I have a lot of other things going on, school. I started my own business. That's fun. Um, and a whole bunch of other things besides. So thank you for bearing with me. For those of you who were able to kind of tough it out through the little drought we've had the last I think 2-3 months maybe. But there will always be something coming out on this channel. Don't you worry about that. It's a hobby that I've committed to for probably about 7 or 8 years, and while there are ups and downs, I will always be working on something. But yeah, so 2v2 today. Obviously, we're playing Silmarillion Total War. This is going to be on a later version of the battle overhaul that I made for the new patch. And this is Mithram and Haladin versus Doriath and Doriath, actually. Both of those factions have gone through a lot of big changes, and we're going to talk about that as we move through the armies. But first things first, let's take a look at the defending team here, or Team Blue, I suppose you can call them. And that's going to be the Grey Elves of Mithram being played by Mevin. The Grey Elves have changed, I don't know if I'd say quite a lot, but I would say that their contours have become a little bit better defined. They very much have an anti-armor niche right now, which is very important because the dwarves are very strong. And there's a lot of other heavy factions that have been dialed up to 11 just by virtue of the changes that I've instituted with heavy units pretty well across the board. So Mithram serves an extremely useful purpose for that. And Doriath actually has, while they don't have the heaviest infantry, they do have some pretty heavy units indeed. So units like the Shield Riders of Mithram currently have Hunter Javelins, which means they've got that 14 juicy armor-piercing damage, making them extremely strong at harassing really anything that they want to set their sights on. Elephants can stand up to it for... You won't kill a unit of elephants, I don't think, with the javelins from a 63 strong horse archer or horseman unit, but you can actually chip away quite a lot of health. And a lot of other heavy cavalry, most of them, almost all of them in fact, are 1 HP, so this can be a very strong, very versatile unit. You can bring lots of them, but they're extra expensive when you're playing as Mithra. I believe you can bring between 3 and 4 units if you really wanted to invest in it, but it's about 1,200 or so florins, and even more when you throw upgrades into the mix. So you are investing a lot, and you need to make sure you get value out of them. Moving on over here, one of the new kind of interesting things, I think, it's a small change, but I think it does come with some pretty interesting choices and some very noticeable consequences, is that all of the Mithram mid-tier units can now use Shield Wall. Normally that's something that we confine to spear units, but now the Mithram units can use it basically across their entire mainline units. But the big difference is that they actually go down in cap. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, they actually go down in cap. So instead of being, I think it's like 4 to 5 for mid-tier units, they're actually down to 3. So they probably would have started at 4. And that does have some pretty big consequences, because when you're shield welding like that, you are really shrinking down the size of your front line. You're greatly increasing the survivability, but you're also decreasing the offensive potential of those units, at least for their ability to deal damage quickly in a short period of time. So it is a bit of a choice there, but I think it's a choice that it's not really one way or the other. You know what I mean? Like, you're not always going to want to just stuff them all into shield wall. Sometimes that just won't be an option. In team games, you know, that becomes, I think, a little bit more viable. But when you're really shrinking down your front line like that, it can be very easy to get overwhelmed and things surround you, get behind you, and that's basically it. Those units will hold out for a long time, but there's no oomph behind it. In any case, moving on back here, we have some Hunters of Mithram. As their name would suggest, they have Hunter Javelins, which have been cranked up, I believe, from 12 to 14. To account for the heightened armor of a lot of units, including elephants and things like that, that they're meant to be sort of a counter to. Yeah, they've also got an extra volley, so instead of having 3, they've gone up to 4. Hunter Javelins in general really got a nice facelift, and I think they've been kept current and kept pace with the rest of the mod that changed around them. Over here we have the Hewing Guildsmen. These are going to be medium infantry. I think they had an armor upgrade. I don't know if they have it anymore. But the Madoc has been given a little bit more interesting features. It's not just like a better axe. It does have high base damage, it's armor piercing, of course, but it does slow units down, unlike regular axemen who do get a boost to their mobility. These units are going to be a little bit slower, so they'll be slower to respond, but if you deliberately place them and get them into good fights, they can do extremely well for you. And behind them, we've got some Sword Bearers of Mithrim. They're going to be without their armor upgrade. You can see the difference here. I want to take a look at these guys. It's just that, but with swords. I think so far there's only one, but there is definitely a possibility some things will be hiding over in here. Although I guess because we're on his team, we'd have vision of everything. So maybe there is just the one unit. Got 3 units of Hunters of Mithrim. Very big investment there into his missile core. So we got the 3 hunters. We've got 2, I believe, 3 units, 4 units of cavalry. So he's gone really, really hard into those AP missiles. And Mevin, rather, likes to play very, very aggressive rush builds that mostly center around infantry and infantry micro. So it'll be interesting to see how he's able to use this to good effect against Dorniath, who are also very aggressive and very good at cutting through mid-tier chaff units like basically all of his army. Moving on now, we have Pantheon of Barsoom. He's going to be playing the House of Haleth. He's got some Warda of Brethil here. They have retained their AP trait just to keep them kind of relevant in an otherwise very strong, offensively oriented Halidin roster. And they've also got an AP to help them out a little bit more against heavy cavalry in particular. A lot of lighter spearmen and one-headed spearmen, I think in general, have a lot harder time getting through the armor of really heavy cavalry units, and that's partially by design, but also partially something that is trying to be addressed. I think they got some new spear bonuses and things like that to help them out a little bit, but they certainly won't melt heavy cavalry. But heavy cavalry charging into them should certainly be a little bit more afraid than they were in previous iterations of the patch. So yeah, we got some Warda there. I think it's 1 unit, and he's actually hiding some Berserkers in there. So for those of you unaware, we have switched over to EOP, the Engine Overhaul project for Medieval 2, which opens up a lot of new possibilities, especially campaign, which is largely why we did it, but for multiplayer there are some fun perks as well. And in this case, that's going to be true Berserker units like what you have in Rome 1. They don't seem to throw units around as much, but they do get some weird special animations where they kind of spin it to win it and do like a whirlwind, and just they have area attacks and they can be extremely devastating despite their very low numbers. You can see here that Ulflin went down from like 120 to 140, so that's like a 2/3 decrease, but it's very much needed because these are extremely strong units and they can be oppressive in very large numbers. So hiding them in amongst here is a pretty popular tactic on the test build at the moment. I certainly do it, and a lot of the other players do as well, just because you're not always paying attention to it, right? And the flags, while helpful, they don't always give you the best indication of kind of what's there. And I like that because it allows you to do sneaky tactics like this and to have a little bit of interesting kind of skill expression and things like that. So I don't know if that's something that will change in the future, but yeah, something to be aware of when you're playing on live, when you eventually get the patch, is that that's something people like to do. In the back here, we've got some Mordrot of Maldwyn, and they're basically the same unit that they were previously. I think they've been switched over to a spear cavalry unit. They still don't have AP on their main unit because that would be, or on their main attachment, their weapon attachment, because that would be a little bit, I think, oppressive. Just have this AP unit running around smoking people. But they do have some harassment javelins there as well. Very nice for picking on other cavalry. Not so much the heavier units, but very good at harassing light, medium cavalry, archers, infantry. They're just a very versatile unit all around and very quick. And because they have that spear, they're also not the worst. They don't really outshine a lot of melee cavalry, although some they can do very well because of those high anti-cavalry bonuses and their high melee defense. But there is a lot of melee cavalry out there that will outfight them. But overall, it's a nice sort of middle-of-the-road, versatile unit that really does suit the Halidin roster quite well. I think they've only got 2 units. That's what I'm seeing here. Yeah, they got 2. Moving on now to the rest of the army, we've got some Sweardebro there. They have obviously gone through a very big change. So I've added certain new traits to our kind of our book, essentially, that houses all of the things that units are supposed to do and what they're specialized in. And one of the new ones that I've added is the expendable trait. It adds to the unit size. I believe it adds plus 20, something like that. And then you have racial traits as well that will also increase size or decrease them depending on who it is. The Null Lord, you get a penalty to their size. But in addition to that racial bonus, they have the expendable trait, and that's, I think, plus 20 size and minus 10% to their overall total cost once everything has been tabulated by our stat calculator. So they're a little bit cheaper, a little bit bigger. They still have the Relentless trait, as do all Halidin sword units, which is really nice. So they can kind of punch a little bit above their weight. But they are very middling damage, things like 7 or 8, and you can boost that somewhat, I think, by like plus 3 with attack upgrades, but they're not going to do a lot of damage. That's not really what they're there for. They are one of the few Halidin units that have armor upgrades, and that paired with their higher melee defense, their high armor, and their larger unit size just makes them the best frontline unit that the Halidin can bring to bear, bar none. And I think he's got 1, 2, 3 units of them, so really, really strong unit at the moment, but not really because it can hit really hard. Out in front, we've got some dismounted Mardrot. Wow, I can say my own names. Of Maldwyn. I think there's 2 units of them here. They have been increased in size, I believe, from, I think it was 40 to 80, so they've gone up quite a lot in size naturally. They're a little bit more different in terms of their stat line than their mounted cousins over there in the forest, but overall, largely the same unit. They are spearmen. They're also harassment javelins, so they can be a really nice screening unit. Yeah, just an overall good addition into the Halidin lineup. In the back here, we've got some Huskarlar. A lot of throwing axes. They were kind of hard to use, just because of their lower range and their very persnickety firing arc. I think the firing arc is largely the same, but they do have 1 extra damage and 2 increased range. I think their range went up to 90 from like 70, which may not sound like a ton, but it is actually a lot in practical terms. So it's a hell of a lot easier to be able to use these guys and get their ammunition off before you can throw them into CQB, where they can do very well for themselves. They're a strong supporting infantry unit that can really mix it up in melee when it comes time. We've got 1, 2, 3 units of them, nicely browned Halidin force here. Then, of course, we have the Dour Warda of Ethel Brandir. This is a really cool model that was given to us by Reaper. He's one of the guys working on... I'm getting my mod names mixed up. I believe it's Conflicts of Eriador or something like that. COE. I believe that's the team that he's a part of, and it's an excellent looking model. One that pairs really nicely with the base. They are, of course, a bodyguard unit. They are 1 HP. Oh yeah, the general model comes from him as well. 1 HP. They have been upgraded to have true hunter javelins, but they no longer have... I think they don't have the same amount of ammunition. And I had a reason for doing that. I don't know what it was. It is something that may change in the future, but their damage is now at 14, same as hunter javelins, and they hit like absolute trains in close quarters combat. Halidin units all get bonuses to their base damage, which is... it ends up shaking out to be more than just regular flat increases to damage when applied through our stat system. So we've got 104 of them right here. Very, very nice unit. Let's go ahead and we're going to fast forward a little bit here because I think that pretty well covers everything, unless I'm mistaken. Oh, he's got some dismounted Wall-Strider Dragoons as well. They got the same treatment as the dismounted Mardrot. There's more of them. They're a little bit better in close combat. They've got more arrows as well, so they can support a Halidin force like this for a lot longer, and just makes them overall a better unit to bring. Let's go ahead and pause it there. Pop on over to the other side. We've got one of the Dorniath armies, which recently got a bit of a aesthetic facelift by Stewart of Dale. We're going to have the classic mounted company of Region here. As all heavy units have, they've gone up quite significantly in number. Or sorry, not in number, in armor, obviously. They're heavy cavalry. The same applies to other heavy units. So armor and shield are going to be quite high, but their melee defense will be quite low. So they are a little bit more susceptible to charges and armor piercing. The amount that their shield has gone up is not at all commensurate with the amount that their melee defense has gone down. So they will be better against certain things, especially projectiles. Armor is obviously the best stat in Medieval 2. It's 360-degree protection to all attacks, whereas the other ones are a little bit more positional and situational, melee defense and shield. So overall, it's a stronger unit, but it does have some fairly well-defined weaknesses. And certain units like Toll, for example, can really overwhelm these guys. The Lauskeraz right now are extremely good. Not broken, but like they are very, very good, and they do act as a nice counter to units like this. The catch being that a lot of heavy units, in addition to those penalties to their melee defense, they also don't do well in forests. There's a lot of places where heavy units will get, stacking, -1. Usually it's at least -2, between 2 and 3 minus penalties in the forest, which really does add up, especially when other things are getting bonuses against them. That being said, it doesn't really apply to Doriath. That's one of the fun little racial perks of being a Sindarin elf who abide primarily in forests. These guys get to ignore that a little bit and are a little bit more versatile as a result. Out in front here, we've got the Rangers of the Girdle, and this is the new look that a lot of their light units are going to have. And behind them, we've got Shield Bearers of Region. They do exactly what you'd expect they would do. They are spearmen, heavy spearmen, and sitting here in Shield Wall, they can be extremely hard to shift. Oh yeah, Tendra's Fox is of course playing this army. I'm sure you guys have noticed that already, but Marksmen of Region have gone up in size a little bit. I think their missile damage increased ever so slightly. You could say the same for all other archers as well. There's now more of a sliding damage scale based on training, which corresponds to tier. So your higher tier archers will have a little bit more ammo and significantly higher damage, but obviously there are less of them, so that gap in ammo does get closed somewhat by the fact that there are less models in the unit. But overall, it does make archers a lot more of a fearsome force. Previously, they were very good for harassing light units or positional attacks and things like that, and while they are still good at both of those things, they are more of a threat to light medium cavalry now because of that higher damage. It's not a huge increase. It's about, I think, 3 on the top end for the highest tier of archers, notwithstanding these guys, of course, because they have a special projectile and are therefore an exception. But yeah, overall it just makes archers a little bit more generally useful, but it doesn't turn it into, who has more archers wins the game kind of rock, paper, scissors scenario. In any case, Marksmen of Region, they're going to be out front here, and they are also decent enough with those two-handed swords in close combat after the fact. More shield bearers here. Looks like we've got a detachment of them. Warriors of Region in the back. Now, it's important to note that two-handed axes like this have actually lost their armor-piercing trait, and that's been shifted on to things like maces, things that you, I guess, would more intuitively associate with armor-piercing. And the reason that was done was ultimately because there wasn't a huge difference between a two-handed axe and a two-handed mace. The only real difference was that the axe had higher damage and had a little bit less melee defense that was taken away at the end of the whole calculation process. But yeah, now there's some bigger differences. Axes generally are going to be extremely good at dealing a lot of upfront damage. They move faster than other units as well, so I think they get like a 0.5 increase or something like that to their overall speed, which is significant. That is, it does add up, especially when you're looking at cavalry and things like that. So they definitely still have their niche. They're very good at thinning out chaff and hordes of units, but they don't have the same armor-piercing punch that they used to, which means that they're a lot less useful against certain units like other heavy infantry. Although with the amount of damage the Doriath axes do, it's not a huge gap. But the really big difference comes in with elephant class units, which I think have overall been, you have to be very selective about when and how you deployed them before. And a lot of times they could be, fairly easily shut down and zoned out and things like that. And while that's still the case, there's still lots of counters to them in the game. They are a little bit tankier, a little bit more rugged, so you can be more offensive with them. And factions that rely on them heavily, like Angband and Nandon Gortheb, have a bit of an easier time of it. They're not going to just lose their elephants, in a moment's lapse of concentration or something like that. But in any case, we've got 1, 2, 3 units of the Warriors of Region. We've got Kuthalim here as well. Still the same old Kuthalim. They are armor-piercing with their arrows, and they're pretty strong with their relentless trait in combat as well. Another unit here of the Marksmen of Region, more shield bearer detachments, and I think that's going to do, unless he's got some hidden Lancers of the Girdle hanging out over in here, or some more light troops that he's concealing somewhere in the woods. Moving over here to Captain Gervais, also playing the realm of Doriath, we have the Rangers of the Girdle. I'm sure you guys are familiar with them. They haven't really changed. I won't say at all. Like, obviously, everything has changed a little bit in the overhaul, but in terms of practical usage, they're basically the same unit. More shield bearers here. Whole bunch of shield bearers. Got some Axe Guard of Region. Same thing applies to them as applies to the two-handed axes, but they've got a bit more missile survivability. And they are slower as they are not shock units. Shock units kind of operate on their own sets of rules in certain ways. Over here we have the Wardens of the Girdle, and they're actually they're supposed to be light infantry. They look a little bit heavier, but this is with their armor upgrade. So I think that brings them up to about medium infantry status or something like that. Tyrion Lysdanen, looking all fabulous over here. This is a legendary company. They have their armor piercing on the axes back. So it's one of the kind of few really strong counters to armor that Doriath has. And in addition to that, seeing as they lost it on the two-handed axes, it's a legendary company, operates on a little bit of a different level than other units. They actually have armor piercing in close combat as well. So this is one of the reliable anti-armor units that I think you're going to see in a lot of matchups where Doriath has to fight heavy armor. More Wardens of the Girdle hanging out in the back there. Axe Guard of Region as well, looking like they've all got their armor upgrades, so they're basically heavy infantry status at this point. More Wardens of the Girdle in the back. Warriors of Region. Got some Kuthalim here as well. His own units of Marksmen of Region. And I'm not seeing any cavalry, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not here. It could just be... Well, actually, heavy units, that's another thing that's different about heavy units, is they can't hide in the woods. And I think that applies even to Sylvan Elf cavalry. So what we got out here, Mithrim coming in hard with those 4 units of their Shore Riders. I'm not too sure what the target is going to be here. There's a lot of heavy infantry. Taking on some of the marksmen would actually be really nice. It might take a little bit of that range pressure, something that Mevin just doesn't have an answer to. If he's able to stick it to the Kuthalim and the marksmen and things like that. So there are some fairly high-value targets out here. Naturally, he's going to have to be aware. Let's go ahead and turn it down. Things are kicking off really quick here. Naturally, he's going to have to be aware of a countercharge from the Warriors of Region. It would hurt. It would hurt very bad. The Short Riders, they can kind of give as good as they get off the charge. Since they are axes, they do have just higher damage overall. And that, of course, translates into charge bonus, even if it's not distinctly allocated to its charge bonus. Some nice shots there. Yeah, a little bit of a deep flanking maneuver here with all 4 of them, leaving sort of a slug trail of dead horsemen behind, but overall relatively light casualties on those 4 units of horsemen. Taking a look over here, it looks like the Haladin are just going for it. They're getting scythed down by those Silverthorn arrows. Now you'll notice that a lot of them aren't really dying. Only a couple have died after taking 2 full volleys to the face. And that's largely because they have their shields, of course, facing forwards, but this is a very low damage projectile. This is what it's meant to do. It's meant to just kind of toss these units around and make it very difficult for them to fire. And you can see that even though they're within range of something and they aren't kind of getting ready to shoot, they can't really, because of how disruptive those things are. So it does, these guys the marksmen have very limited ammo, but it does make a difference in terms of buying you time. Giving you a little bit of space. So it's a really cool little tool that you can use to great effect. I have no idea what happened here. Oh, the Tyrion Lysdanen happened here. That makes a lot of sense. Whether Sweater Brother here just getting completely dumpstered by those Tyrion Lysdanen, and it looks like Tundra's Fox had a hidden unit of them hanging out over here. So him and Rex seem to have basically the same unit. And now they're going to countercharge these poor Sweater Brother, and that is going to be ugly. Three-quarters of that unit, I think, on the way in. They are getting smashed up. It's smashed up hard. And Tyrion Lysdanen, I don't think are really going to take more than a handful of casualties. Down here, main lines are clashing. I think the shield bearers are probably going to be able to pull this out just by sheer stubbornness. They're going to outlast, I think, a lot of these Sweater Brother Argelion. They just don't really have the damage to pierce the heavy armor, especially with the armor upgrades. that these units have obviously been given. Sweater Brother here have managed to kind of break up the line a little bit. Some of them are getting in behind the shield bearers, and they are taking a greater rate of attrition over here. Things don't seem to be going too bad for either side. Welsh Rider Dragoons charging into the Mounted Company, but the Welsh Riders are very, very fierce. And as I mentioned, they are an Axe unit, and so they get some pretty significant bonuses to their attack. So their charge and their fight in close combat here is definitely very good. Now, the Elves, they're no slouches. They're starting to bring it back a little bit, especially with some support from the second line. Rangers with the Girdles getting some really nice flanking shots here. And now a second unit of the Mounted Company moving in to support their brothers here. And I think Panthan is going to find himself in pretty dire straits. Meanwhile, over here, the Warriors of Region have charged headlong into the Huskarlar. And this is just going to be a massacre. Both of these units can deal a pretty high amount of melee damage, and I think they're just going to wipe each other out. It's going to even out over time. Over here, the poor Mordrod getting just bullied by the Warriors of Region. It's not even a fair fight. Some of the Haladin running for their lives. I think it's probably... I have no idea what happened over there, actually. More Warriors of Region charged into the dismounted Welsh Riders, but it looks like some of the Ulfinen have got in there. Let's see if we can see those weird... Yeah, you can see one in the background. They just sort of spin to win. It's not the most elegant animation, I'll give you that one. But it certainly is extremely effective. You can't argue with the results that it'll get you. And they are cutting those Warriors of Region to absolute pieces. Meanwhile, over here, Panthan's army has engaged more of the Warriors of Region. It looks like they've been thinned out pretty mightily, probably by those very same Berserkers. And Tundra's Fox, yeah, he's engaged over a very wide front here. It's going well in certain areas, and it certainly seems like Panthan has the advantage in others. So we're going to come back and check on this in just a little bit. Oh no, I missed what happened to the Shore Riders. Let's see if we can find some dead cavalry here. It looks like maybe they ran into some heavy spears. Lots of resistance there. Mithrim. Oh, they are still kicking. Well, here you go. Hoping to avoid a frontal charge from those Warriors of Region, which is very wise because that would wipe out a significant portion of that unit. The Shore Riders are going to dance away, and they're going to toss back those jabbies, and it does a lot of damage. These unshielded heavy units here. So some pretty significant attrition. The Bane of the Incomers are here. Extremely strong in the meta at the moment. I think they will be getting brought down to 1 cap instead of 2, just so the unit can continue to be as strong as it is, but 2 of them can be a little bit oppressive if they're allowed to fire for any significant period of time. So some disruption coming in from Rex's side of the field, and that's just going to wreak absolute havoc on these poor Banes of the Incomers. So when you can pressure them, there's not a ton that they can do, but when you've got 2 of them, you can't bring the same amount of pressure to bear. So, yeah, potentially very, very scary unit, but getting absolutely bullied at the moment. Wardens of the Girdle stopping, I don't know, stopping them from firing. I think these guys are not going to last for too much longer. Counteroffensive here to try and take some of that pressure off, and that's going to work to shut down these Marksmen of Region and the Kuthalim. But I think it's a little bit too little, too late. Let's see if they can get a shot off here. I don't think they are. They seem like they've been a little bit bugged, paralyzed by the fact that the unit is really spread out and under a lot of fire and a lot of pressure and disruption. But they are going to get a shot off here. Let's see if we can see it. No, this needs space in order to spend a little bit of time in the air. I think it's like 2 or 3 seconds in the air and then it bursts. Sort of like a mangonel, but I don't think that's really going to do a whole lot here. Let's see if Mevin's able to at least save part of the unit. Even 21 can be very deadly. Over here, seems like they're not doing too bad. That's that shield wall at work, allowing them to kind of outlast these units, but I would be surprised if they weren't ultimately outflanked and surrounded and dragged down. Over here, got that second unit of Bane of the Incomers. Hunters of Mithrim looks like they were dealt a pretty nasty blow here. Yep, so he had some hidden outriders. And they're going to get right on top of those Banes and whiff their charge entirely. That is very unfortunate for poor Mr. Rex. But there's not really anything from stopping them from just moving out. And, oh, yeah, I spoke too soon. There's some Shore Riders of Mithrim hot on their heels. They've at least mercifully run out of ammunition, so they're not going to be able to ping these guys from a long distance, and these Outriders are going to be forced to flee. So, overall, who is winning? I mean, it's hard to say. It's very chaotic. There are a few places, especially over here, where these guys are being surrounded utterly. And there's these little pockets of resistance, and Mevin seems to be doing all right, but I think that he's losing more places than he's winning. And that's going to be the end, I think, of those Bane of the incomers. They're going to run off the field. We probably won't see anything else from them. Although a little bit of a surround here, or a partial surround on this Act card of Region. And they're going to get cut to pieces. Now, there's still quite a lot of the human guildsmen left over. If they can get into the rear of, say, these warriors of Region, they're going to have a field day whacking through these guys. They don't have enough melee defense to really stop those Maddox from being extremely scary. And there's still, of course, the matter of the Mithram cavalry that's marauding around. Now, they are greatly reduced, and I don't think you'll see too much more from these guys, especially not with all the pressure that they've been receiving. Of course, naturally, they're being dragged away by the menacing threat of those Outriders looming on the horizon. But these Wardens here are going to get caught up in a little bit of a charge, and they're going to get hacked to bits. Like, these guys have axes, they hit hard, and those Wardens are going to, especially with that friendly fire, they're going to be forced to flee. Marksmen of Region, not really sure why they'd be shooting these units. They don't really have the missile damage to hurt them. But I guess something is better than nothing. Looks like those human guildsmen and that cavalry managed to get into the archers here. Normally, if it was just the archers... Oh, there's some spearmen mixed in there as well. But if it was just the archers, I think they'd have a really easy time with that. But it's not just the archers, is it? You got Kuthalim in there, you've got spearmen. They're going to hold just fine. So overall, I would say the Mevin and the Mithram army are losing here. But let's see what these Banes can do before we pop back on over to the other side. Oh yeah, there's the split. And this is where that thing can really hurt. And they actually bounce as well, just to make it extra scary. One more shot. I really want a good one. I really want something juicy here. And you can see all those little blood puffs. That's actually going to be enough, I think, to maybe rout some of these units that are in a little bit more difficulty. Anyway, popping back on over here. Oh, it's just ugly. It's just disgusting across the board. I think Doriath is starting to take the upper hand. So this, as I thought, would be an absolute, just, what's the word I'm looking for? An abattoir. There's a ton of dead Doriath infantry here, and they just traded relatively evenly, I think, into the Huskarlar, but there was some extra support that was brought up from the 2nd and 3rd Paladin lines. But at the moment, I would say that Doriath is winning this. The Axemen are doing a little bit better over here against the Spearmen, but honestly, the Spearmen will hold off forever, and these guys are going to do all the damage until they cut their way through this medium infantry. Kuthalim managing to flank the main line here. Looks like there's some Tyrion Lystanen left, and they're coming up against a Dara Warda, which is a very bad place to be if you are a Sylvan Elf. Pardon me. But I think with the addition of Kuthalim here, we're going to slowly begin to roll up this line. Now, both sides here, it's been relatively even, but the Spearmen, they have that defensive edge, so they've managed to outlast a lot on the Halland line. And then down over this little dell here. It's ugly. There is some help coming in from those Huskarlar. I don't know exactly what they're shooting at. It might be into the front of these Spearmen. There's a very, not much of an answer, but more of a whisper from the Rangers of the Girdle have been reduced down to 5. I think overall, there's definitely an edge in terms of the red team here. They've got about 7 or so extra % killed, but you know, fairly even in terms of percentages. But I think that the red team has the advantage here. This could very, very quickly snowball. Let's go ahead and kick it into full speed. Rangers of the Girdle here, cutting down the last of the Bane of the incomers, and down they go. We got here just in time. The sentries have really done a great job here outlasting these units. When there's nothing to like flank and surround them, spear wall units or shield wall, not necessarily spear wall, but shield wall units can last an extremely long time. They're so hard to break down. But now there's some units that are able to kind of charge into the rear of them, and that's going to turn around very, very quickly. Looks like some of the Wardens are running, Shore Riders are trying to run them down, but they're also getting picked at from that back line there, and yeah, it's very, very painful. And down go. I think that's the last of the Mithram cavalry. More of those Mithram units being brought to bear. Kuthalim's still extremely healthy. Let's see if they get anybody. Let's be a valiant sacrifice. Or is it going to be just a futile gesture? We'll see. Futile gesture it is. And you guys are going to die very, very quickly. Sword bearers have a pretty decent charge. Get that off into the side of those shield bearers. They're pushing deep into the formation. They really managed to kill too many of them, though. As they push through that crowd and start to surround them, you're going to see more of those spearmen begin to drop. Over here, they're doing pretty well, actually. The marksmen are hemmed in on two sides by spears. And given enough time, they could probably cut their way through. But these marksmen, look at them. They're still pretty healthy. 78 men left in the unit. I think it's a foregone conclusion. Yeah, see, look at that snowball now. Down goes the Haladin general. Or actually, no, that would have been the Doriath general. Wow. Wait, what's happening over here? Okay, so this little stubborn bunch of Paladin units, 5 Rangers of the Girdle being very annoying over there. Swear Brother being slowly outflanked, but okay. I thought maybe this was a rout. No, it is not. Swear Brother doing okay over here. It looks like the Doriath general went down, but the Haladin just don't have enough pressure left to really make the temporary morale penalty that all these units are going to be taking worthwhile. They're not winning in enough places. There's not enough pressure. So I think this is a foregone conclusion. But he does have 10 Ophidan left. And that's potentially very strong. But they are actually being shot by those 5 archers in the back. So even these 5 archers, they're basically down to nothing. But they can be very scary. I'd probably send my little 10-strong unit of Huskarlar over here to deal with them. And then throw my Berserkers into the fray, which is maybe what's going to happen. Yeah, they're in there in their Berserk mode again. Yeah, let's see if we can see these units doing the thing. Yeah, look at that. Look at that area attack. Multiple units going down at the same time. They're also relentless. Not that you'd know. I think when it switches the animation set, it maybe doesn't account for that. But we'll see. Oh, they actually rout. No way, hey? Nicely done. Oh, now they're going to be able to get in here and hopefully support somebody. Swear to Brother. It's going to be relatively close, but I don't think there's enough Paladin left to really make a big difference. Well, that's how that is going. Let's go and check on the other side. Mithram putting up a mighty resistance here. Like, they are losing, and I think they've been losing for a while, but very, very sticky with those shield wall units. And this is sort of their niche in a lot of ways. They have anti-armor, and they've also got this sort of stubborn survivability. But as I mentioned in the introduction, it does come with something of cost, and that being less units on the field and smaller front line when you choose to use those defensive capabilities. But I think this is literally everything that's left for Mithram. Yeah, they've got a few routing units, but it was a good fight. Like I said, Doriath is a very offensively oriented army, and they love to be in melee. So when you just give that to them right off the bat, it won't always go well for you. But Mithram actually kind of stood their ground here and did pretty well. Now, if this was a larger team game and you had another player on each side, like this could really be like an important moment, and maybe Doriath would have been able to be held off long enough for support to arrive and for the tide to turn. But I don't think that's going to happen. Unfortunately, there's no one here to save Mithram. No Rohirrim charging over the horizon. And that is pretty well going to be it, I think, for them. We'll look here. Yeah, we're starting to wind down. Est mort sous les coups de l'ennemi. Aidons ces hommes à le venger. Yeah, there goes the Mithram general. That should be enough to send his remaining troops into a bit of a panic. So Rex has just a handful of leaves out of the mighty oak that used to be his army, but ultimately he'll be victorious. More sentries being driven off there. And over here, yeah, it's basically game over. I think the Haladin have already expired. No. Look at this, eh? Yeah, they're just holding on. Very, very stubborn here. but you can really see why this unit is good at what it does. It's an excellent line infantry unit, and with the exception of the one unit that got absolutely pasted by the Tyrion Lythonen, this is a pretty damn good show. We're going to go ahead and put it up to 1.5 times. Mithram has essentially expired, and now it's just a matter of crushing this last stubborn pocket of Hound resistance. I don't think there's any Berserkers left. I think they've all died off. And this is the sum total of Thunderous Fox's army, so relatively close. Oh, that's actually one of Captain Gervais's units, so this is pretty well all that's left of Thunder's army. That was a really good game. Really, really good. Coming down to the last few moments here.
À guerroyer sans relâche, la fatigue gagne nos troupes.
And just 24 of them left. Let's move it up 6 times. Then you can go into the little post-battle analysis and things like that. Take a look at what did what for the blue team, who unfortunately were beaten, but they put up a really, really strong
Nos
showing.
ennemis ont remporté cette bataille, mais ils n'ont pas gagné la guerre.
There we are. So let's see what did what. So Panthan, this is his replay. We're going to be able to see his army. Those Ulfheden, eh? 40 men in that unit getting 384 kills. That is extremely impressive. That's like, what is that? That's like 8, or it's like 9 or 10 times their number, like a 10 to 1. That's extremely efficient. The Huskarlar did quite well. It was pretty rare to see your Huskarlar do the sort of damage that these guys were doing. And there's always one unit, right? This is why you bring multiple, because there's always one unit that gets focused down and absolutely pasted, and they just can't really pull their own weight, which is why you tend to have multiple. 3, I think, is generally a good number if you're really trying to rely on a unit. At least 2 of them, if they're used well, will be able to put up a good accounting of themselves, whereas, there's always one unit that gets completely dumpstered. For example, the Mardrod of Malduin, look at that. Of the 2 units, one of them got completely destroyed. And the other one got about twice as many kills. The Welsh Riders, again, you got that. It's a pattern. Am I crazy here, or is there a pattern for sure? You have 3 dismounted Welsh Riders. 2 of them did well. 1 of them got beat down. The cavalry there's a lot of investment into his cavalry units, and I don't think they paid for themselves here. I didn't exactly see all the things that they fought, so if this was like them trading with other cavalry units, then that's great. For the most part, they did their job. But things like the Mardrod of Malduin, they can change games, especially when they're able to hammer an anvil or get nice flanking charges and things like that. Even their very presence can force the other player to turn his units around to try and face them so they don't get charged in the back, and that's going to give your troops that are pressuring them a little bit of space and time to deal extra damage if you're on top of your micro and issue an extra attack command. So losing the Cav, probably, I think it really made a big difference. We saw the amount of units that Thunderous Fox had left at the end. It's a few cavalry charges worth of units that could have seen them off, especially when that general went down. So that might have been the thing that ultimately ended Panthan's chances at victory there. Over on the other side, I mean, I can see what Mevin was going for, especially, having all that cav to just kind of keep the other player distracted, having this very, weird, not quite contiguous line worth of infantry. A lot of that, I think, is an aid of getting his Banes into a good position, because they're the win condition in that army. Like, the amount of damage that 2 of them can do, and when other enemy units they see an easy fight, and a lot of people will take it, and then they bunch up around those shield wall units, and those shield wall units, as we saw, will hold their ground for quite a while. And then you have those 2 Banes out there, and they punish blob units like you wouldn't believe. So I can see what he was doing. Unfortunately, it was the archers on the Doriath side, and some of the cavalry as well. We did see the cavalry harassing the archers. I don't know if they did necessarily a ton of damage. and just the amount of admittedly low ammunition skirmish units that Doriath has, but they had them in enough numbers that they could kill off those Banes, several times over. So it was a good strategy, one that I think could work against a lot of armies, but certainly not against this particular Doriath composition. If they had gone a little bit heavier into their melee units, brought more like axemen and things like that, things that could potentially be shut down and held up while the Banes do their job, rather than having a lot of the wardens and the rangers and the marksmen and things like that. It's a lot of short-lived skirmish, but it's enough to kill off 200 Banes. So interesting game. Relatively close. I think it was like 100% to like 90 at the end, so like within 9 or 10% or whatever. But in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as J Monster. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. It might be a siege, depending on if I have the stamina to talk my way through a 33,000 frame siege. But we'll see. In any case, my name is Jordan, also known as J Monster. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.